Welcome into Straight Fire, a guy who loves to get everybody worked up with the quarterback tears at the Athletic. It came out this week. Some people are fired up. Joe Burrow makes the leap in. Who's falling? Let's bring in Mike Sando of the Athletic. Mike, how are you?
I'm doing well. It's one of my favorite days of the year.
Yeah, I can imagine. So let me read just for everybody at home. The panel for who's judging these quarterback tiers consisted of 7 GMs, 8 head coaches, 12 coordinators, 12 executives, 8 assistant coaches, and 3 involved in coaching analytics. I am just curious and I don't know if this is phrased poorly, but why are executives polled? Is that more since it's not a GM? Is this like
Right.
owner or like what?
No,
Why
it
is that?
could it could be like a, pro personnel director, right? Or a player personnel director, or a senior personnel executive who used to be a GM and is now working, for another team. So it's kind of a catch-all. It could be somebody who oversees the salary cap or something like that. I try to get people that are seasoned that have done it for a while, and but there's a good mix. There really is a good mix of ages and different types of jobs and different types of people.
Now, unlike a lot of lists, Mike, where people will maybe leave someone out or put someone too high just to get, oh my gosh, I can't believe they did this. And then the list goes viral and you get a lot of clicks. Like that's,
Yeah.
internet list 101. It doesn't seem to be the case here, which is great. And obviously,
Yeah.
polling helps. So the top tier, Patrick Mahomes, obviously, Josh Allen, obviously, Joe Burrow, I think, obviously, but it sounds like maybe there is a little pushback on Burrow.
Yeah, there is. So what, I spend a couple months putting this together because I'm talking to 50 people. It takes a while. I start right after the draft usually. And I get so far into it that everything makes sense to me by the end of it. But then when you show it to a group of people that haven't been doing this for the 2 months, you find out what stands out and is crazy to them. And I'm always a little like I read through it. Sometimes I try to guess, like, okay, what out of this are people? You're too close to it to really know what people are going to see. So the first thing I got today was Burrow's been hurt too much. When's he going to start to slide? What's going on with him? Defense helped him get to the Super Bowl. All these things. Like there were people that look sort of glass half emptying him. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And I feel like if he has another year where he's hurt, we're going to have that conversation, and
Right.
that's in the writing of this. But there's a lot of fans out there who are like, he should already be moving down.
Yeah, I can't. Those people seem to be overreacting. And listen, I'm the kind of guy who calls Joe Burrow Glass Joe on the herd, and all these Bengals fans get worked up. Like I like him. I mean, I think he's a
Yeah,
top tier quarterback. I don't really think there's any debate. Now he wasn't great last year. He's had some issues at the beginning of
yeah,
seasons,
yeah,
but I mean, are we just going to forget how he just dismembered the 49ers last year in a vintage Burrow performance and then took apart the
yeah.
Bills? Like, he is incredible. Now, I'm sure some people were worked up about Lamar Jackson not being in the second tier.
Or
It's
in the first tier.
Lamar's.
Yeah,
What's that? Or
not
not
being
being
in
in
the
the first.
first
Yeah,
tier. Yeah,
because he was the MVP.
yeah.
But look, Mike, you know this. Lamar didn't have a great year last year.
I know it was such a hard thing to try to vote for the MVP last year, and I think you just sort of had to say, like what I did, I voted for him in the MVP at the end, and I understand all the arguments for everyone else. I just figured, okay, this guy was on the best team, led him in passing, led him in rushing, and he's an integral part of what they do. But it was nowhere close to his MVP season of 2019, for example. And then the way that it ended. So as I was polling this and talking to people for like, I would say for the first 25, 30 voters, Lamar was like solidly in tier one.
Hmm.
So I thought he was going to make tier one. And then as I got through the whole 50, it evened out. And he was very close, just missed it by 2 or 3 votes.
Hmm.
I think it's perfect, though. I think it's perfect that it's a smaller tier one. So he's not behind Herbert. Okay. He's not behind some of these other guys. I think that was frustrating for Lamar fans in the past. Some just football fans like, wait a minute. Um, but all of these guys that are not in tier one have some kind of a hole. And for Lamar, it's, hey, more reps, please, that are successful when you have to pass. They spent, to his credit and to their defense's credit, they're always ahead by a lot. But when they got to play Kansas City and were behind, didn't look as good. And he has struggled in the playoffs partly because of that. The game at its hardest for quarterbacks gets reduced to having to pass when they know you're going to pass.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean he's not a good passer, but a pure passer having to do it in those circumstances has not been his forte. He's probably better at it, But I think if he beats Kansas City and flourishes in that format, he's easily tier one.
Mm.
Easily. I mean, he's up there with Allen and Burrow, in my opinion, in this poll, if that were to happen. But I think it's just a perfect line because that line exists for a reason. And he's the
Yeah, no,
next
no.
guy. He's a top five quarterback. He's fourth. So you can't complain too much about that.
Yeah. It is weird that was it a Sunday night or Monday night game against the Niners where Purdy had like 3 picks in the first half. It felt like that was for the MVP because if you remember, Purdy was legitimately right there, and then
Yeah.
Lamar had a good but not great game, and Brock Purdy was awful, and it was like, okay, Lamar's the MVP, and I think Dak ended up passing Purdy for runner up,
Yeah.
even though
Yeah.
Purdy's Niners crushed him. It just feels like sometimes we overreact to a game or two when it comes to MVP. But with
See,
tiers, I don't think you can
yeah.
do that, right?
No, I think in the MVP, the voters were like just waiting for Purdy to have a couple bad games, so they didn't have to worry about that. They didn't have to go away from their priors too much, right? Hey, this is a late round pick. It's all the Shanahan system. That's what people want to say and believe, and there's truth to it. There is truth to it. He's different than some of the other guys. I think that made it easy to remove him. In this, he makes a big jump. I mean, I'm looking at him here right now. Purdy comes in, I believe he's number 12 overall. He's solidly in tier two, but he's not, he's not up there with Stafford and Rodgers and Herbert and Lamar, who guys who've done it for longer and guys who've done it a little bit more with some traits, right?
Yeah,
So,
it seems like
yeah,
tier two is really robust. 11 quarterbacks in there, and it's
yeah.
weird because Lamar is in the same tier as Kirk Cousins, and that just doesn't seem right.
Kirk Cousins has always been on that borderline of two,
Yeah.
three. So yeah, if more than anybody over the years, people say, "Can I give a 2.5?" They feel like that's where they feel like he's earned more respect than to be a three, but they also don't like to put him in the same tier with some of those other guys in two. I do think he was playing really well last year, though, so I don't have as much of a problem. But you're right. There's different ways to play the quarterback position, and Lamar breaks the mold. There were guys, who said, "Look." One of the quotes in there was like, "He's a tier one with limitations for me." Well, the definition of tier one is there's not these limitations, but people are like, this guy's he's so good at what he can do that it's almost disrespectful to not give him a one. So guys give him a one, even though they know
Yeah.
he doesn't hit all of the criteria, but he certainly does things differently and is more dynamic. You're right, than a Kirk Cousins.
So to nobody's surprise, the biggest jumps from last year were Brock Purdy, who went up
Yeah.
2 tiers, and Jordan Love. Now, Purdy, I get, okay? I totally get it. I got to be honest, Mike. Like, I understand Jordan Love was great for 8 or 9 games.
Yeah.
He just was equally bad as he was good in the first half of the season. And I know you got to pay him and he got a massive contract, but something just strikes me as we're going gaga over a guy after 9 games. I mean, Purdy has a year and a half, maybe a little more than a year and a half, but something like that under his belt. I don't know. Are we overreacting to Jordan Love?
Yeah. Well, you said you have to pay him. Why? Where's he going? He going to go
Well,
sign with a different team this offseason? I don't understand why these teams do it. Uh, it's almost like hey, we believe in our guy, and this is proof. I think Green Bay also gets the benefit of the doubt. Oh, they've done this before. They had Favre. They went to Rodgers. Now this guy showed some flashes. Clearly, they solved their position. I do think there's enough good to feel good about him. If I were a Packer fan, I would feel like, hey, I like the odds here. But I think you're right, too. There were bad games as well, even Tampa Bay later in the season. Not a great game, right?
mm,
And then when they lost in the playoffs, not as good of a game. So you do have to, they paid Rodgers without that many games either. So, maybe they know and they're on to it. I don't think he's going to be a bust. I think he's shown enough that he's going to be good. But um, if he had come in the top of tier three, would you feel better about that?
for Love? Well, I
Yeah.
mean, Tua's at the top of tier three, and I don't know. We've got more data on Tua being a better quarterback than Jordan Love, don't we?
I think, though, with Tua, people say, yeah, he's got the great production, but that Jordan Love would do it across more systems than Tua would. People look at the scheme and the what's around him as being exceptional and think that when, like for example, when he has to throw it or when it gets off schedule, it gets really hard for him. Whereas with Jordan Love, even though the body of work's not there, if a play were to break down and the guy had to just go do something on his own, I think most people would feel Jordan Love could do that. So that probably helps him. I do agree that you know, I don't know why they have to rush into the huge contracts with some of these guys. Like even with Tua,
Mm.
where's Tua going? What's he
Yeah,
going to do?
it's
What,
the whole
53
like
million?
what's the market? Oh, while we're there, let's touch on
Yeah.
Dak, who is a hot button
Yeah.
guy. He checks in at tier two, number 9, right
Yeah.
behind Stroud, ahead of Goff. Dak has been longing a big new deal. He has not gotten it, and I keep hearing from all these reporters, oh, there'll be a huge market for Dak if he walks because they can't tag him. And I'm like, well, hold on, who's paying a free agent quarterback all the money? Like that's not how you build a team. Everybody knows that now. So I don't see the Raiders saying, "Hey, instead of drafting a quarterback, let's spend 55 million a year on Dak Prescott." Do you see that happening?
I do. Oh yeah, I think if he were to
Really?
get the market, he would get that. Yes. Yeah. It's
So
rare
because
to see. I mean, Kirk Cousins did it, and at that time his numbers weren't as, as big as the numbers are today, but they certainly put him in the near the top of the league at the time,
so he
as
did he get
somebody who
40 or 45 a year?
when he first started, he
Oh
got,
no,
I
no,
think
I
it was in
meant
the
I'm sorry, when he went Vikings to Falcons like this year.
this deal, yeah. This deal did not put him as high, I don't think, relative to the top of the quarterback pecking order as his previous one did when he went to the Vikings. But he's really the only guy who's gotten to the market in that manner, right? I mean, it's rare to get it in that manner. Sometimes you
Yeah.
might be cut or whatnot, or you could be
Yeah.
traded. But that's a or in the case of like Peyton Manning late in his career, he's willing to take less to go to Denver than he could
Right.
have gotten, right? Because he's trying to build a team, or Tom Brady certainly did a deal with Tampa Bay. But I think a Dak Prescott could command more. Now we don't know if that's the number one most important thing to him either. Maybe he wants to win and feels like there's a
Well,
place for him, but
I think we
it could
can
all get
guess.
resolved. But he's made $200 million. I mean, he
Right,
doesn't
but okay, so if that's the case, why doesn't he just take 50 or 45 from the Cowboys? And it sounds
because
like he
he's in a
wants.
right because he's in a great situation though. As a player, you work for this to have leverage over the team.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a wonderful situation for him. And he's already got paid after having a broken leg. I
yeah,
totally
that's true.
see, like, if I were him, unless, hey, just the security and let's do it and let's not have it be on my mind. If that was important to me, then maybe I would just say, hey, let's do it. But it feels like, Jerry Jones is now they just paid CeeDee Lamb, but I think he's in a different boat as a truly elite difference maker
Hmm.
young, right? You're taking care of a guy. I feel like this offseason, kind of with McCarthy, Jerry's waiting, right? Like, hey,
Yeah,
last year wasn't good enough. I want to see what I want to do. And well, I think he would re-sign Dak for the right number. I don't think he's gonna I think at this point he's resisted just going to the as high as he need, to go to the top of the scale.
yeah,
I think if both sides, I think I don't know if this will happen because Jerry usually just pays guys in the end, but like
usually.
it wouldn't be the dumbest thing if both of them just said, hey, we got a lot of respect for each other. We hope this works out long term. Let's just go see what happens this year. If Dak goes and wins, we win in the playoffs. Shoot, that's a great problem for us to have. We'll we'll
Yeah,
we'll be right there at the front of the line. That sort of a thing would be interesting to me because Jerry Jones can do that. He's not getting fired. He's the owner.
right, right. I guess the tricky part with Dak is it's like, okay, we've seen him with a stacked deck in Dallas, and in the playoffs, he's been limited every year. He got outplayed by
Yeah.
Garoppolo. He got outplayed by Purdy. He got Jordan Love came in the building and looked better than him. So it's like, what am I paying? Am I really? If you're paying 55
Yeah.
mil a year for Dak Prescott, what's your ceiling? 9, 10 wins if you're the Raiders? Maybe. Yeah, you still
I
would only get the third best quarterback in the division. And that's why
well,
I don't know. Sorry, go
but
ahead.
look, Tua just got 53 million. He's a top of tier three with
But
a
that's
bunch
to
of great stuff
stay.
around
Yeah.
him.
I think staying is differently as opposed to like signing a new guy.
Yeah.
Um,
But don't you think you can get more when you have a market? It just takes two teams.
well, but that's the thing. Like for Cousins coming off the Achilles, going Vikings Falcons, there was really not a market for him. The Vikings
I know,
clearly
but
didn't want to pay him, right?
he's 36 and
He is a little
and
older. That's yeah.
he's a little bit older. I think that's a little bit of a factor, just where people feel he's at in his career. I think Dak could have a $60 million market out there.
I mean, Mike, if that happens, you can come on and dance all over my head. I don't see
Yeah.
any team that has a brain doing anything like that. Like 60 mil for a guy who, and let's be honest,
Well,
Mike,
did you see what Deshaun Watson got?
I did. That was a desperate Browns. Never had a quarterback, needed him, and how's that worked out? It's
Well,
like,
yeah, no doubt about it.
ooh,
But if they had
mhm.
Dak Prescott on their team, they probably would have made a deep playoff run with that defense, possibly, right? Maybe he would have melted down or something. But
He's had a great
um,
defense in
I
Dallas,
know
and
the last couple of years they've had a good defense. I
I
mean,
will say,
it's crazy that they have the second most wins the last 3 years to Kansas City, but just
yeah,
haven't pushed in the playoffs. So that's why
dominant,
he's not higher
yeah,
in
regular
tiers.
season bully, right?
Yeah, regular
Now
season
he
bully.
came in ahead of Jalen Hurts on the tiers. I feel like Hurts is so 2 years ago he goes to the Super Bowl, and I'm pretty sure off that everybody thought Jalen Hurts is the man. Was he tier one or no?
No, he was tier two. So here's Dak. Just Dak's like a plane going along at 35,000 feet, right? And then he's been doing that for 7, 8 years. No one's coming up this year and going, here's what I think of Dak, and it's different, right? Everyone
Right,
thinks the
right.
same thing. He's a good, solid tier two guy going at 35,000 feet. And Jalen Hurts was a guy at 10,000 feet. And then Jalen Hurts kind of went like this, but then dipped down to 30. So
Yeah.
that's all it was. He came up, but then last year, there's questions, and I think there's still questions about the the team in terms of its offensive philosophy and how it meshes with him, his ability, like we talked about, with some of these other guys to handle the pure passing situations. It didn't look very good last year. Clearly, he made strides from what he was before and showed he can be a good passer of the football. But when he had to do it, it didn't look as good, and sometimes it looked really bad. So, how do you feel about where they're at? Just as you know, Shane Steichen not there, a coordinator
Mm.
change. You bring in Vic Fangio. There's just a lot of Kelsey retires. Maybe the tush push isn't as good. Maybe there's more on the quarterback's plate in terms of managing the game without the 15-year center. Right? To me, there's a lot of ways that place could be harder for him to do as well this year.
Yeah. It is interesting. How much do you blame the loss of Steichen? And people forget, I know it ended badly. They were 10-1 last year. And I
I
know some of
know.
that was luck
I know.
involved, but they started 10-1. And it was like, Jalen Hurts is really good. I feel like he's a little almost undervalued. Although I will say,
Yeah.
in tier three, Tua's at the top, followed by Trevor Lawrence, who dropped down a tier.
Oh,
And
yeah.
Lawrence feels like a polarizing guy all of a sudden because he hasn't lived up to generational number one pick, blah, blah, blah.
He feels low to me. Like I'm
Yeah.
surprised there's not more people saying maybe it's Jacksonville, you know. But
Yeah.
I felt like if I would have seen this in advance, I would say, ooh, that's quite a bit of a dip for Trevor Lawrence went down 7 spots in the rankings in one
Yeah.
year. Don't we know they were 8-3 and he was doing decently? And then he had a series of injuries,
Mm-hmm.
two, three injuries that really affected him probably. But there's also, I think people are wondering there, okay, who's calling the plays? How's this going to look? Why doesn't it look a little bit better than it does,
Mm.
than it did? And they fired the defensive staff. The defense was pretty good. So that's interesting with him. I think with your question on Steichen, I think it's a big deal. I think we even saw last year, I think Steichen did a good job with the game plans and seems to do a really good job with uh, getting the style of offense right for the quarterback. If Anthony Richardson doesn't make it in Indy, I don't think it's because of Steichen. I think it'll be because, either he was too raw or the injuries continue being a problem with that style of play or whatever, right? He showed a little bit of a lack of awareness
Hmm.
sometimes running and took some big hits. I don't think it'll be for the offensive design. I think Steichen's good at that.
I'm looking down at the bottom of tier three, and it's like Deshaun Watson, who you alluded to, he just continues to free fall.
Oh,
What do you think? I mean, do you think that the personal issues, taking a year off, all that got to him? Because the only potential parallel was when Le'Veon Bell took a year off. Remember, he thought he was hot stuff, and
yeah.
he's like, "Oh, I'm just going to get my money," and then he comes back totally washed, and it's like, "Oh my gosh!" Now Watson was younger and played a different position, but for whatever reason, he cannot get his act together, and he's
Yeah.
got a great head coach.
I'd say a couple. I do think there's something to what you're saying. I want to talk about that, but I would say he has had some injuries, and then they have a new offensive coordinator this year, even though it's obviously Kevin Stefanski's offense.
Mm-hmm.
I think play action system, kind of RPO quarterback. That was one of the points brought up. Hasn't been a great fit, but I think there has to be something on a human level, and just the complicated ways in which our minds and just with the way we respond. Think of this, all of whatever he had going on clearly shows that there were some things out of control probably in his life, right? There were some things that's not a good sign. I don't,
Mm.
the degree of guilt or whatever. I'm not talking about that. Just all of that stuff going on shows there's stuff under the surface that wouldn't be helpful for maximizing performance. Then you really sort of become a bit of a pariah so that people don't even like you anymore. And
Sorry. Yeah.
that's a big deal though.
No,
Like to
you're right.
people, like how you feel about going about your day. Like some people can get down if people on social media are being mean to them or whatever, right? That's a part of the mindset. And then, by the way, we're going to give you a fully guaranteed contract that you get the money no matter what.
Mm.
So that's a lot of stuff going on that if that was going on for a lot of people at age 25, 27 or whatever, you might not get peak performance.
Yeah.
And then you sit out as long as he did too. He's lost something, he's lost something. And I almost feel like I'm not sure he's going to get it back. And as I look at these
Yeah.
tiers and see, like, I almost wonder he's in the middle of tier 3, like, is that almost too high? I
Oh,
mean,
jeez. Yeah.
well, how come you react like when's the last
I
time he's played good ball?
I think he had one good game last year. Maybe it was the Bengals game. I don't, or some.
Yeah.
There was one game where he was. Oh, maybe it was a Ravens game, and he was really good. But I think that was the game he got hurt in. And then he's like, "Oh yeah, he's gonna be fine." Then it's like, "No, out for the season." I don't know what to make of Watson. Is something's off. The other guy I don't totally understand is Kyler Murray, who
Yeah.
sometimes the news comes out on somebody and it's so damaging that you cannot remove it from your analysis. And I'm of the belief, Mike, that the homework clause really killed Kyler Murray's value. It's really tough to respect someone who gets sent
Yes.
home a computer with stuff to look at and then doesn't open the computer all season. And the staff knows it because their IT team could see, yeah, he's not looked at any of these videos. Like,
Yeah.
how do you get
There,
past that? That's your star quarterback.
right. The only way you get past that is by playing really well and showing people that
Mm,
you're not that way.
yeah.
And that just doesn't happen overnight. I feel like his eval in this thing was kind of incomplete and disappointing to me. Like I wish that we had some new thing to say about Kyler, but he was out with an
Yeah.
injury. Then he came back and did okay. I think there's generally a good feeling around what they're trying to do offensively there with their coordinator, and that I know there's optimism in Arizona. They're feeling good about it, kind of behind the scenes. But he just needs to play for a season and play well. That's how you change the narrative. Until then, you're right. That thing of the homework is just kind of there. Maybe he can overcome that by just maturing and playing really good ball. He hasn't done that, so we're just
Yeah.
kind of waiting. He hasn't had a chance either, so we'll see it this
I,
year.
I mean, and again, Mike, this is kind of a bigger picture thing, but like,
Mhm.
okay, Patrick Mahomes has Andy Reid, right? Patrick Mahomes and plus Andy Reid equals all-time greatness. Josh Allen doesn't really have anyone. He had Dable as his OC, so I'm kind of a little more impressed with Allen. Burrow's OC. I mean, nobody special. But then you see like, oh well, McVay's got a guy in there. Um, who's the
Near the
oh,
top,
Ben
you're talking about,
Johnson.
yeah.
So like some of these quarterbacks have really good offensive coordinators, and Tua there in tier 3. It's like, okay, he has Mike McDaniel. Okay, great. Yeah, what if Tua had, I don't know, Nathaniel Hackett? Like, he's probably not even in the league, right? So
Well, what totally? Well, he was going out of the league when he had before, when the previous staff was
Flores,
there.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was ugly, and like Kirk Cousins has kind of bounced around, and then you have my guy Brock Purdy, and I will always be a champion for him. I like the underdog story. I know people want to say it's Shanahan. Well, Mike, I know we're not talking contracts as much, but I think Purdy to me is maybe the most fascinating quarterback this season because he's looking to get paid after the season.
I'm
And I don't know where you are on this. I know, but it sounds like based on your DAC comments, you're pay the quarterback guy. I just
no,
like the idea. Oh no.
no, no. I'm telling what I said about Dak was that I think that he will get paid.
Hmm.
What I don't like as much from a team standpoint. A lot of times we analyze these things from a team standpoint, right? If I'm a player, I want everybody to get paid.
Yeah.
But if I'm building a team and we're talking about strategies for teams, I would like to, easier said than done, but I would like to say to Tua, hey, we think you're a really great fit for our system. We don't, just in all due respect, we think there's a huge gap between Mahomes and almost the rest of the league, but even between you and Josh Allen, maybe you're saying this to the agent in the negotiation. There's differences here, and we think that the benefit here in Miami is a little bit more mutual, right? This little bit more equal. That hey, you're great for what we want to do. Don't get me wrong, but you're not carrying the whole thing the way
Yeah.
a Josh Allen is going to be asked to do or a Mahomes can. And so we would love to pay you instead of here, where the top of the market is. We'd like to pay you here. And
Mm.
so how's 42 a year or whatever it is? And
Mm.
then what happens is that we go, oh, nope, sorry, the market's 55. Okay.
That's
You think so? You want to go somewhere else and get it? But
yeah.
the teams don't want to risk upsetting and having it be an issue.
Mm-hmm.
So they pay the price just to get it done. And then, life pretty much goes on.
So that's where the Purdy one comes in. I love Brock Purdy's story. I love him at his salary, as everybody would. Mike, I'm going to be honest. I am of the belief that the Niners should have drafted a quarterback this past year. I think you should take one every year because somebody smart is eventually going to do it. You're going to win a bunch with your quarterback on the rookie deal. And at the end of it, when he asks for top of the market money, you move on from him, trust your system, the infrastructure, and you just put in a new quarterback and make it work. I thought Penix could have been that guy in Miami filling in for Tua. I'm not paying Tua 53 million a year, whatever. Why not put Penix, a veteran college quarterback, slide him in, lefty, right, can easily get the system. I thought that would have made sense, but like you said, people are afraid to upset the apple cart. And it sounds like
Absolutely.
maybe you don't think any executive would roll the dice with something like that.
Well, you mentioned the 49ers. There's few organizations that are strong enough to do that. It's really hard as a GM to go to your owner in a lot of teams and say, yeah, our guy's not that guy we took in the top five. He's not really all that great. Let's just move on from him after a year. And the owner's going, we're selling tickets around this being a championship run, right? Do you want to bring in a rookie? Right? Nobody wants to do that. But the 49ers are a little bit different that way. I feel like Shanahan's obviously a difference maker as an offensive coach, and he's a strong personality. And so, maybe they could be the type of team to do that. It's also, though, easier said than done to just uproot your starting quarterback, right? It's just it's sort of one of those things that makes great sense in theory.
In theory.
But it is a business of people, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
business of how you treat people to some degree. And what more could you have asked Brock Purdy to have done if you're there? If you're in that locker room and you say, oh, if this guy came in here and did everything right and he led the league and this and that, and we're just kicking him to the curb, what does that say about me? What does that say about the thing we got going here? When Coach talks about, when Coach Mike McDaniel talks about what we've got going here with Tua, is he not really believe that? Because we're kicking him to the curb, right?
That's the tough part that is difficult to navigate. You just have to be a little cold-blooded and be like, listen, this is a business. We can win with Brock Purdy on his rookie deal. We can't win when we pay him 55 million and have to jettison 3 other starters,
That's why we have the best jobs in the whole thing, because we get to make all these tough decisions with no consequences, no accountability, none.
Yeah,
I can say what Chris Greer should do, John Lynch, and it's super easy.
It's easy. Yeah, the Trey Lance one is super interesting. You're right. They traded up to make him their guy. He fits our system. He's perfect. Oh, wait a minute. This ain't the dude. And to move off of him so quickly was so genius. I saw him throw 5 picks over the weekend for the for the Cowboys, and it's like, well, damn, Trey Lance going to be out of the league in a year or two. So, I mean, he might be right at this rate.
That takes it takes a lot. There's a lot of people in the league going, oh, I would have been fired if that happened, or if we did that, and they're probably right. But they have a little bit of strength there in that organization, and certainly they recognize what the difference maker Kyle Shanahan is, and they've got one of the best records in the league since doing that deal. Even though, look at a lot of their first round picks haven't been amazing first round picks, but they've always been there in the end.
All right, Mike Sando, The Athletic, the quarterback tiers polarizing. Brock Purdy makes the biggest leap with Jordan Love. Baker Mayfield makes a leap. We didn't even talk about him. I don't know. We'll see how much of that was Dave Canales related.
Let's see this next year. Let's see him do it again, right?
Yeah, I would say Bryce Young is more likely to make a leap this year than Baker Mayfield duplicating what he did. Would you agree?
I don't know about that. I mean, I think Baker has had good seasons when healthy for 2 different teams that won divisions. Yeah, they had pretty good defenses probably too, but I think Baker's pretty good, but he does have to kind of put it together more than 1 year at a time.
Yeah, certainly. All right, buddy. Thanks for taking the time. Enjoy the upcoming season, man.
This was great. Really a fun discussion. Thank you.